Yo, what is good, everyone? Welcome to the Fantasy Football Prodigy channel, and in this video, I'm going to give you my top starts of the week for Week 11 of the 2022 Fantasy Football season. Make sure to drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel, and let's get right into it. We're going to start with the quarterback position, where my first start of the week is Justin Fields. I feel like at this point, everyone knows that he's pretty much an auto start, but just so that everyone is aware, Justin Fields, the last handful of weeks, has been on fire, and you have to keep him in your lineups as long as possible, especially in a week against the Atlanta Falcons, a defense that really cannot guard anything. Since, let me think, about week 5, where he scored 17 points in Fantasy Pro scoring against the Vikings. He's literally increased his points every week other than last week, but he had 42.7 points in week 9, and he almost kept that trend going of increasing points when he scored 40.4 against the Lions. I'm not saying he's going to put up 40 points in week 11. As a matter of fact, I could see him maybe coming down to earth a little bit, just because in a lot of these games where he's put up astronomical numbers, it's been the type of game where the Bears are putting up points, but the other team is also putting up points, and it's just this back and forth, nonstop crazy action. Week 11 against Atlanta, I don't know if the Falcons can really score, if they can keep up with the Bears, but regardless, at this point, Justin Fields is a lock. He's a top 5 play. And even if he doesn't put up a 40-point week, I think against the Atlanta Falcons defense, he's a safe play. So you got to put him in the lineup unless you have like a, Josh Allen, Mahomes type of player. And speaking of bad defenses, my next quarterback start of the week is Daniel Jones, Danny Dimes of the New York Giants. He's taking on a Detroit Lions defense that cannot guard anything at any time or anywhere. He's been up and down this season, but he has had a couple big games. He does offer some rushing upside. Obviously, he's not Justin Fields, but he can move on the ground a little bit. And in Week 11 at home against Detroit, it's a great matchup. So if you don't have a locked-in starter, I think Daniel Jones is someone that you can stream with confidence. And now we're going to move on to Russell Wilson, quarterback of the Denver Broncos. This is a guy that I thought would be great this season coming into the year. I thought this offense would be awesome, but it has not only been not great, it has been downright dreadful. They've been really bad, but the Las Vegas Raiders, they are the solution, okay? Even with Jonathan Taylor, he's been struggling all year. But last week, Jonathan Taylor, he ran through that defense, and he had his big bounce-back game. Now, obviously, Russell Wilson isn't a running back, but I expect a huge bounce-back game for Russell Wilson. He's had a bad year, but if you look in Week 4 against the same Raiders team, which still has an unbelievably bad defense, by the way, they have not gotten better, he finished as the quarterback 3 on the week. So I'm not saying he's a must start, but if you have a player on a bye week and he's on your waiver wire, he's someone that you can pick up and play with as much confidence as you can have in this version of Russell Wilson. Now we're going to move on to the running back position, where I want to talk about Rhamondre Stevenson of the New England Patriots to start. The Jets, their opponent who they're playing, the New York Jets, they've actually been pretty solid on defense, but I just want to bring him up here because at this point, Rhamondre Stevenson is an auto start unless you have an absolutely stacked running back core. He is basically an auto start at this point. If you look at his weekly finishes here, he's been solid since week 3. He's been startable every single week. Even when he was the running back 23, he still had over 10 points in half PPR. He is seeing a ton of involvement in the passing game. 8, 7 targets the previous 3 weeks before the bye week. Even before that, there were many games where he saw 5 targets. So even though it's not the greatest matchup against the Jets, he's going to be involved. He's going to get the volume, not only through the air, but also on the ground. And he's always a threat to score touchdowns. So Rhamondre Stevenson, lock him into your lineups as a borderline running back 1, high running back 2 play. Next up at running back, we have David Montgomery of the Chicago Bears. So there's a couple factors that go into this call. David Montgomery has not had his best season. He's been losing quite a bit of work to Khalil Herbert. But Khalil Herbert was recently put on injured reserve and will not play in this Week 11 game. And obviously, when I talked about Justin Fields, you know who they're playing. They're playing the Atlanta Falcons. That defense is not good. And honestly, I think this is a game where David Montgomery could perhaps have his best game of the season to this point. That wouldn't be hard. The only real great game he's had, he's put up 14.6 in Week 2, 16.2 in Week 5. 12.2 in Week 7. So he's had a couple pretty good games here, but I think he could surpass those totals in Week 11 if things go right. Like I said, I don't know if the Atlanta Falcons can keep up with this offense. So while I do think Justin Fields is a good play regardless, if it becomes a situation where later in the game, the Bears are up big and they just need to run out the clock. David Montgomery then has that ability to be that closer in the game where he sees a bunch of volume at the end of the game. But even regardless, if it is a back and forth and points are being scored, I think he should still see some volume in the rushing game, especially with no Khalil Herbert, as I mentioned. And he might even see a few extra targets in this game than normal. So I think he's a safe play with a ton of upside if things go right with the game script or if he's able to fall in the end zone. So I like him a lot as a probably like a higher end running back 2 play in week 11. And then finally, I'm going to kind of go with a little bit of a running back tandem for my last one. The main guy I want to focus on is Brian Robinson of the Washington Commanders. They get the Houston Texans this week, and this is just a simple case of volume versus a great matchup. Not only just a great matchup, but the best matchup in all of fantasy, you can argue. Brian Robinson last week saw 26 carries. He's had another 20 carry game earlier in the season. He's had multiple games with double-digit carries. Not a ton of involvement in the passing game, but against the Houston Texans, this should be a game where he is able to kind of just grind out the game. You know what I'm saying? I would not surprise me if he saw over 20 carries. He should be more effective than he was last week. The Philadelphia defense is better than the Houston Texans. So he might be even more efficient, but even if he's not that efficient, if he gets 20 carries, I think he'll be at least solid for fantasy. He'll have an opportunity to score a touchdown in this one. And if he is efficient, he could put up sort of a week-winning type of performance that you might not expect against this awesome matchup. And then on top of that, his teammate Antonio Gibson, I'm just going to throw him in here as well as someone you could play. Same position, running back, same matchup, Houston Texans. I don't think he'll see as much work on the ground as Robinson will, but he might see a few targets in this one. We'll just have to see, but I think Antonio Gibson is someone that you can also start. But both guys are solid plays in this great matchup. All right, now we're going to talk about a player at the wide receiver position as we switch positions here. This player is someone who a lot of us have had some hype around, and it just hasn't worked out. But I think this week might be when we finally see Kadarius Toney go off this season. As long as he doesn't get injured or something, I think he'll have a great week for fantasy. The recently acquired Kadarius Toney of the Kansas City Chiefs came over from the New York Giants last week with his new team. He saw 5 targets. It turned into 4 for 57 and a touchdown. He also ran twice for 33 yards, 17 points in half PPR, the wide receiver 11. He is just an explosive athlete. And in week 11 against the Chargers, the Chiefs are going to be without Juju and without McCole Hardman. So Kadarius Toney really could be their wide receiver 1 in this game. Travis Kelce will obviously be the number 1 target, but he's talented. He's explosive. This offense can put up points. And he's going to get a great opportunity with Patrick Mahomes, one of the best quarterbacks at supplying fantasy points to his offensive weapons. And I think this is someone that, again, if you're dealing with bye weeks or injuries or something, you can definitely put him in your lineup. There are some question marks with how he's going to be used, but even with 5 targets last week, it turned into a wide receiver 1, like top 12 finish. So I think he has big upside in this game. All right, so it is a little risky just because we haven't seen him with this team too much, but the talent, the explosiveness, the offense, the opportunity with the injuries, I think you could throw him in there and expect some good things. Next up at wide receiver, we have Courtland Sutton of the Denver Broncos. He's had an up and down year. It's been pretty rough lately, but in week 11, I think this is a potential get-right opportunity. There is no Jerry Jeudy, fellow wide receiver of the Denver Broncos, so that might increase his targets a little bit. I think him and Greg Dulcich will be maybe slightly more involved than normal. And it's the Raiders, so it's one of the best matchups in fantasy. The Raiders defense, they just can't guard anything. So when you combine the increased opportunity, the potential increased opportunity with the Jeudy absence plus the matchup, I think this is a spot where he might come through and have a big week. So I'm starting him in the leagues that I have him, and I think you probably should too. All right, next up, we're going to talk about Gabe Davis, my final wide receiver start of the week. He's had another guy that's had an up and down season. He's sort of been reliant on big plays. So this is definitely not a safe start of the week call, but sometimes you just got to call your shot. And in week 11 against the Cleveland Browns, this is definitely a game where I could see him getting loose for a big touchdown or a big reception. He does have week-winning upside. He does have a wide receiver 1 finish earlier in the year. Wide receiver 12 in week 1, wide receiver 8 last week. So if he's able to get a big play in this game, I think you'll be happy you started him. And even last week, he saw 10 targets. That is really good to see. If this game, obviously you probably have heard about the weather in Buffalo. If this was being played in Buffalo, I wouldn't be so confident about this call with playing in a snowstorm. But since they are moving locations, he should be more set up to get some work in the passing game. That offense in general should be able to throw the ball a little bit better. So again, not a safe play. He could, if he doesn't get a big play and he doesn't see a ton of targets, it might not work out. But if you can afford to kind of live a little bit on the edge, I think Gabe Davis might win your week for you. Now we're going to move on to tight end. George Kittle has had not a George Kittle-like season. He's been pretty disappointing. Week 6 through 8, he was pretty solid. But other than that, it's been a disappointment. But in week 11, he has a dream matchup with the Arizona Cardinals. They have given up so many points to tight ends in fantasy. And George Kittle, I think he's still talented. He should be able to exploit this matchup. So if you can't start Kittle now, you can never start him. So I would put him in your lineup unless you somehow have, like Kelsey or something like that. So George Kittle, lock him in. And speaking of Travis Kelce, obviously I'm not going to tell you that Travis Kelce is the start of the week. I'm trying to give you some guys that, some advice that's a little bit more helpful. So that's why I'm going to bring up Greg Dulcich. This is not a Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews level play, but this is someone who is streamable. He's had good games. He might be on your waiver wire. And in week 11 against the Raiders, I'm just attacking this matchup as much as I can, especially with no Jerry Jeudy. Like I said, for Courtland Sutton, he might see a little bit more involvement. But even if not, he's been pretty involved in this offense for a tight end. I mean, 5 targets doesn't seem like a lot, but at the tight end position, when you're as athletic as this Greg Dulcich guy, you can do a lot with 5 targets at tight end. Okay, so I'm kind of just hoping he gets maybe 6+ targets. And against the Raiders, that could turn into a lot. It would not surprise me at all if he has a big play or gets in the end zone. But obviously, this isn't a top tier guy, but he's still someone that I would play as a tight end 1. Okay, so the tight end position is gross, but Greg Dulcich, I think you can start him this week. Now, ladies and gentlemen, it brings a smile to my face to bring up this next guy because before the season, I was pounding the table for him. I loved him. A lot of people clowned me at my draft for being so high on him. And he started the year just injuries and Dak Prescott being injured. But things are finally turning around for my man, Dalton Schultz of the Dallas Cowboys. With Dak Prescott, while Dalton Schultz has been healthy, he's been great for fantasy, just like last year. Week 11 against the Minnesota Vikings, I think he should be involved in the offense. Obviously, my Vikings are going to win that game. But the Cowboys are going to have to keep up when we put up, 40+ points on them. So Schultz should be involved. At this point, he's a very safe play. And, he gets this kind of label as not having upside. Okay, but it's like, if you go 8 for 54 and a touchdown, 14.4 points, listen, okay, maybe that's not 30 points, but how many people can do that? Literally 2. Kelsey, Andrews, okay? So, sure, maybe he won't score 30, but the guy can put up double-digit points. And at the tight end position, if you get more than 2 points, you should be happy because tight end can just be gross sometimes. So the last few weeks, 5, 7, 8 targets. I like him a lot. He's my guy. He is a very strong start this week. Maybe you're missing Dallas Goedert. Maybe you lost Ertz. If you don't have one of those top-end guys and he's on your squad, you can play him with confidence. And now I'm going to bring up TJ Hockenson. He's my final start of the week, final tight end start of the week, final player I'm going to talk about for my starts of the week. TJ Hockenson of my Minnesota Vikings. This is not necessarily the best matchup for tight ends, but I just want to bring the guy up because you need to remember his name. And at this point, he's so involved in the offense that the matchup might not even matter. His first 2 games with the Vikings, there was no acclimation period. Okay? 9 targets in his first game, went for 70 yards. 10 targets last week in week 10 for 45 yards. Obviously, you want more than 45 yards, but 10 targets, 9 targets, that's something you don't see from tight ends. Okay, so even though it's a tougher matchup, he's going to be involved in the offense. Obviously, like I said, tight end is a volatile position. So volatile, however you pronounce that. And he might bust. Okay, he might have a bad game, but with his involvement, it's kind of the case I made for all the guys I've talked about. If you don't have one of those top guys, he's someone that you should probably be starting. Okay, I would start him with confidence. Should be involved. Should see some decent yardage and maybe gets in the end zone. So he's a solid start. All right, so those are all my starts of the week. Now I'm quickly going to recap my week 10 starts of the week just to look back a week and see what went well and what didn't go well. So at quarterback, I went with Justin Fields who was the quarterback 1 on the week. And then also Tua, who was the quarterback 3. I keep going back to the well with those guys. I mean, coming into the year, they weren't these auto starts, so I feel like I can keep kind of bringing them up as auto starts, but maybe at this point, it might be time to chill on that, but they're just so good, and they've just exceeded expectations so much that I always just want to bring them up. You know what I'm saying? And then at running back, I said Jamaal Williams was one of my starts of the week. He got in the end zone, put up 11.9, running back 17 on the week, so we'll take that. We will definitely take that. And then my man Jonathan Taylor, listen, before the season, you would be like, hey, man, what color is the sky? You know, obviously you're starting Jonathan Taylor. But no, he has had an abysmal season just with the offense being bad, his own injuries. Since week 1, I think it was, he's been pretty useless for fantasy. But I said, listen, against the Raiders, he's going to go off. And that's just what he did. He had a long touchdown run as well. 23.3 points. The running back 1 overall on the week. I will take all the credit for that performance, JT. And I have him in 3 of my 3 leagues, my Dynasty League and my 2 redraft leagues. So I definitely needed that, and I need him to continue to do that because we need some wins. Moving on, at wide receiver, I said I liked Darnell Mooney. Didn't really work out. You know, he didn't kill your lineup, 7.7 points, but definitely not that upside that we were hoping for. And then Amon-Ra St. Brown. Where's my boy Amon-Ra? There he is. I was going to say, hopefully he's not lower than wide receiver 50. Because he did have a good week. Wide receiver 9 on the week, tied with Paris Campbell for 17.1. He's back for fantasy. He hasn't had a big game lately, so if you can acquire him on the cheap, I would do it. But he saw 11 targets, 10 for 119. So I think he's sort of like a buy low if you are able to dupe some foolish manager into giving him away for pennies. And then finally, Greg Dulcich. He had a bad game. I won't lie, but I'm sticking with him this week. Tight ends, they're up and down most of the time. He was 1 for 11. 1.6 points, but it happens. So those are my starts of the week, and we took a look back at week 10 as well. So good luck in week 11, everybody. I hope you get that win that you probably need, and even if you are in a position where you don't necessarily need a win, still make sure you're setting your lineups all good. Monitor that waiver wire. Don't settle. Don't get complacent, because when the playoffs come, you're going to want to be locked in, all right? So with that being said, make sure to drop a like, subscribe to the channel, and I'll talk to you guys later. Peace out.